think I got pretty close to having that music nail the post, so to speak. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, and welcome. This is my live stream broadcast. This series is called Enthusiastically Self-Employed, and I'm delighted that you are joining us here today. You may be watching us live or in playback right now, or maybe even listening on my podcast. It'll be going on our podcast later as well. But if you are watching on any network, I want to encourage, you can see the ticker running below. Comment below and let us know if you are team live or team replay. If you're watching live, we'd love to know where in the world you are watching us from. With that said, I'm joined today by a very special guest, Carol Ann Lloyd. And Caroline, we know each other from Innovation Women. I'm delighted to see
That's
you. How
right.
are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and it's so good to see you too. It's always fun to see Innovation Women buddies out in other contexts. So it's terrific to be here. I'm really glad.
Yeah, we were talking in the pre-show too, how we booked this months ago. And I remember when we booked it, I was like, October 30th. Is it the 30th? October 30th. That feels like so far in the
Yeah,
future. It might as well have been 2027 in my mind. But then, it is coming up here. And we were talking like, I can't believe it's going to be November already. But delighted that you are here with us. Now, I know a bit about you from Innovation Women, and actually the topic what we're talking about today, what we can learn from Shakespeare. I'm really intrigued on this. It's a different type of a topic than I've done before, but I was kind of like really interested. I know a little about you. For the sake of those that are watching us, could you take a minute, tell us your name, what do you do, who do you help, and what do you help them with?
Well, I'm Carol Ann Lloyd, and I think of myself as sort of what you get when you cross someone who is deeply into Shakespearean history with leadership in the modern world. And what you get is me. I am very involved in leadership and teaching and writing about leadership from the perspective of history and Shakespeare. And so that's what I love to do. I love working with different kinds of leaders, whether it's within an organization or individually, who are looking to make a lasting, what I think of as a legacy impression, rather than chasing the latest bright, shiny object, the real, true leadership that lasts. And that's what I help people do. And yes, I use Shakespeare to get there.
Awesome. I love this like kind of nod to our history to help us in the current day and in the future
Yes.
as well. So again, this is a little bit of a different topic, and some of my followers and viewers might be going, "What? We're talking about Shakespeare today? Isn't this like a podcast for the self-employed?" Follow along with me because there's a reason I brought Carolyn, and I think you're going to be intrigued by the subject here today. And again, don't be shy if you're watching us live. Go ahead and drop a comment below, even just say hi. That lets us know that folks are joining us here. Before we jump in, have you ever been told you sound a little like Bobby Carlton? Has anyone ever said that to you?
I have not. I consider that a huge compliment. So thank you.
I'm going to give her a shout out right now because as you were talking, and you can see if you see my eyes moving around, because as I'm hosting this today, I'm serving as pilot and co-pilot and almost like the flight attendant, like making sure all of our guests are being taken care of. So I've got a dual monitor. I'm looking over here, but as I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, she sounds a little like Bobby Carlton. I wonder if anyone's ever told her that before, but
No, but I like it. I like it. I'll lean into that.
yeah, there you go. I'm going to give a shout out because Bobby, I'm sure, will be happy to see Innovation Women. We call each other speaker friends,
Yes.
collaborating on projects. And, I want to give her a shout out for all the work that she does there.
She's
All right.
amazing.
So with that said, we're here today talking about what we can learn from Shakespeare. So Carol Ann, what can we learn from Shakespeare?
Well, first of all, Shakespeare was an early entrepreneur. And one of the things I love to look at, in addition to the plays, which are all about leadership and making the most of things, his story itself, we don't know a lot of the details, but what we do know is when he arrives in London in the 1590s, he is acting and he is writing plays. And he's known for that. In fact, he's sometimes ridiculed a bit for that, but that's how he's known. And believe it or not, in those days, writers didn't make a lot of money. Well, that sort of tracks with today, but actors, even the best known actors, did not make a lot of money. So he decided to expand his reach by becoming a shareholder in the theater company. And at that point, he's not just paid one time for the play and then the company owns it. That's how it worked then. And played pittance for acting. He now got a cut of every ticket sold to a play he had anything to do with. And that was what made him financially and ultimately socially acceptable enough. He bought the second largest house in Stratford, which was very large, and he got a coat of arms and was deemed a gentleman. And that came because he took advantage of opportunities other people didn't see. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit, that idea of saying, how can I get a greater share or do more or expand my reach here is something we can definitely learn from.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I didn't know this, and this is a really interesting kind of backstory that goes along with it. I feel like too is entrepreneurs, and if you're self-employed, you can probably relate to this, the folks that are watching and listening to this. I've heard of this whole concept of having, diversifying your income streams and having multiple income streams coming in. And sometimes we think about project work, which is Shakespeare's instant. Project work is writing the play and being compensated for the writing part of it. And then sometimes we look for retainer work, and you can say the retainer, is like month to month. And that's like when the show is being hosted in the theaters and you're being paid, a stipend month after month. And then there's also affiliate income, right? And affiliate income, I think, could be maybe the ticket sales or getting a little slice of that pie, so to speak, from every, and I think there's some really interesting parallels there. I didn't know that, because I think when we all think of Shakespeare, we think, well, wow, he made all that money on the plays, and you're saying, no, that's not where the money was being made.
That's not where most of the money was coming from. No.
Yeah.
So he, his company and the head of his company, their lease on the land that their theater sat on, the owner of the land kept, raising the prices on the land, and sort of priced them out of that location. So they dismantled the theater, got the boards across the river, built a new theater on less expensive land. So very entrepreneurial, let's make this happen. And the company raised money by selling shares, and Shakespeare knew a good deal when he saw it. So he was very involved in all of that. He was part owner of the Globe Theater. So everyone's heard, or most people have heard of the Globe. They just don't realize that Shakespeare wasn't just writing the plays. He actually was part owner of the theater, and that's where the money came from.
That's very cool. Now, have you been to London? Have you been to the theater or these sites? I'm not sure if they're the same rooms nowadays, but
yes. In fact, there was a day last year I just treated myself to a full day at the Globe. I saw one play in the afternoon, got something to eat, and went back for a play, sitting in pretty similar seats because I know now where I like to sit, and saw something else that evening. So it was fabulous. The Globe still allows people to come in as this is a recreation, of course, but as they would have in Shakespeare's day, you can still, for a much less expensive ticket, stand in the pit where you're right up next to the stage and watch the play there.
Wow.
I usually treat myself like a member of the nobility in Shakespeare's time and pay for a seat. But it's very much recreating that experience, and I love it. I do love it.
That's cool. So I'm actually going out to the UK for the very first time, speaking at a conference in March. It's in Birmingham, which is a few hours from London, I believe, and I'm bringing my son with me, and we're planning on making a day trip to London, seeing all the sites. So maybe we'll add theater, to that. That sounds like an amazing experience.
And I would love to talk about some other very famous places that you hear referenced in the plays, like the Tower of London, which is, a very well-known site. But did you know the tower is specifically mentioned in Shakespeare's plays? So, you can experience a little Shakespeare even if you don't have time to do the Globe or something like that. So I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep that conversation going offline here too. So I'm curious, Carolyn, how did you get into all of this? And it sounds like you're a very passionate historian. How did you get into this path? Tell us a little about that.
I credit the Shakespeare and the history, let's go ahead and call it an obsession, to my mom and my grandmother, and actually even my great-grandmother.
Mhm.
So I remember when I was young, and I'm dating myself here because when I was growing up, we had a black and white television. I know,
Mhm.
impossible to imagine. But we were always big PBS fans, and my mom was watching, it was originally BBC, and then PBS picked it up, The Six Wives of Henry VIII with Keith Michelle.
Oh, mhm.
And it is still a classic. But I saw the episode where Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, is being arrested. And she says something like, "You can't arrest me. I'm your queen." And I thought, ooh, this is someone I need to know more about. So I was hooked then. And
Mhm.
my grandmother also loved Shakespeare. In fact, her mom, my great grandmother, taught English at a college. So this many years ago, that was quite a thing. But in
Mhm.
any case, my grandmother gave me her copy of the complete works of Shakespeare. And it was
Okay.
the book she had had in school, and her handwriting, her notes are on the
Um,
pages. And then I took it to school. And so my notes are literally on the same page
oh, that's
as
sweet.
her notes. It's just marvelous. And she knew that Shakespeare's works would continue this history and open new worlds. And so it's very much a family thing. My mom took me to the Utah Shakespeare Festival when I
Mhm.
was younger, and it's just been sort of a family, and forever, I sort of think I've forever been interested in it.
Aw, that's a cool story, and I think, I use the word passionate. What did you use? What was your word?
Obsession.
Obsession. I love it. We should all have something in our careers and our lives that we are obsessed with in a positive way. I use pie as a part of my personal brand. I'm not obsessed with pie, but if it's my birthday, I want pie instead of cake.
There
I
you go.
definitely know what I like, and I think as we mature, as we become more experience rich, so to speak, we just figure out the things that we are very passionate about, that we are obsessed with.
Yeah.
I think for you, identifying that early on got you into this path. Now, you were talking about, and we're here talking today again about what we can learn from Shakespeare. You're talking about a little bit of the business model, but what about the actual plays and the storylines? Are there things there that we can learn from Shakespeare as well?
Yeah, so in addition to, the Shakespeare obsession, I did have sort of a quote day job for many years, and I was doing training for organizations in professional development, leadership in particular. And
Hmm.
as I was, passionately reading the Shakespeare and doing these courses, I realized that really everything we need to know about leadership, we can learn from Shakespeare.
Hmm.
So, in my opinion, those plays are the greatest collection of leadership case studies ever assembled. You
Hmm.
have great leaders and terrible leaders and
True. Hmm.
everything in between.
Hmm.
And as you look at the plays, and it's not just the kings. I mean, there are a couple of great kings. Most of the kings, honestly, are rubbish leaders. But
Hmm.
there are individuals who step up and decide to be a leader, whether it's just a personal leadership, just yourself and how you're going to live your life, leadership in a family, leadership in a community. It
Hmm.
broadens leadership in a church group or a political group. And with Shakespeare, it's all the way up to leading a nation.
Hmm.
Those true principles, whether the leaders are using them or resisting them,
Yeah.
the true principles really come through. And I
Hmm.
just felt like I needed to bring those two paths I was on together and lean into how much we can learn from Shakespeare about leadership and business success.
So let me ask you this, Carolyn, because I know you go super deep into the storylines and the history and everything. And there's probably some folks that are watching or listening right now that know conversationally about Shakespeare, and there might be some familiarity with some plays. So can you give us a specific example of a scene or an act in a play where somebody is illustrating a leadership style or embracing it, like something that we might be familiar with? Can you give us one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So most people have heard of Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
And most people think, yeah, yeah, young lovers, very tragic, very sad. So I want to just mention two things about that. First of all, and we've talked a tiny bit about this, Brenda, when Taylor Swift, of
Ooh,
all
you got my
people,
attention. Yeah.
was transitioning, and we can talk about her latest album because it happens again, but way back when she was
Yeah.
transitioning from being this incredibly successful country singer, and she was moving onto a bigger stage, the whole pop world, and just beginning to be what we know her as today. One of the songs that really bridged that gap and that really launched her into all of our consciousness is Love Story, based
Hmm.
on Romeo and
Romeo
Juliet.
and Juliet. Yeah, that's
And
right.
she talked about how she chose that classic love story that everybody's heard of. So as
Hmm.
she's singing about Juliet and Romeo, we all know that great love story. So first of all, it is more common and more in the everyday life than you might think.
Sure. Hmm.
But I wanna go to teensy bit deeper into Juliet. So most of us, if we've read the play, which is the most well-read play in high school or the most read play in high school English classes, so a lot of people have read it or seen parts of it, and there's that famous balcony scene, and the two lovers are talking to each other. Juliet tells Romeo, "You gotta go away, the families are fighting," and he says to her, "Wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied?"
Hmm. Hmm.
And her response shows that she was taking control of her life and of that relationship. And she replies and says, "If thy bent of love be honorable and thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow." So, in other
Hmm.
words, she's setting the boundaries. Look, if you're serious and you want to marry me, send me word tomorrow. She sets out what's going to happen in that relationship. People don't
Hmm.
really realize that or give her credit for that. He goes along with it, but it was her idea from the start. She's taking control. And that's just an ordinary person who decides, I'm going to be in control of my life. I'm going to set the
Hmm.
boundaries. I'm going to do it my way. That's a great example we can all relate to, and
Yeah.
can inspire. She's living in a very male-centric time when she is
Hmm.
considered the property, literally, of her father, but
Right.
she is taking chances to live the life she wants.
Yeah. That's a really good. I thought about it to that level, and I love the Taylor Swift because I'm a Swiftie myself.
Yes, well,
But
aren't we all?
right? Well, we should be. It's, but to each his own on there. But I remember her talking about, in the story, in her version of Love Story,
Mhm.
it's a happy ending
Yes,
with Romeo and Juliet, whereas it's a more tragic ending in the play.
yes,
But I love how you're talking about the choices and how the woman is redirecting the conversation,
yes,
even given the circumstances that she is in. And I think,
right,
there's still, you know, some very, very male dominated companies. The glass ceiling is real. There's a lot of things out there. I
right.
was just watching a video on Instagram this morning where the woman was, and it was a mock conversation, but in a team meeting where the male boss was kind of recapping and saying, hey, we need someone to take notes from this, and Jessica, why don't you do that, because you have really good handwriting and you always do such a good job of taking notes. And she demonstrated on camera how she redirected it, and she's like, well, thanks for saying that. My role in this assignment is to do this part of the project, so perhaps we can have somebody else take notes on this one. Who can do that? And she threw it back into his face a little bit,
Right.
but she did so in a very diplomatic way that kind of created the boundaries. And I think there might be some parallels to that in the
Yes,
Juliet story. Any thoughts
yes.
on that?
Yes, because she does follow up on what he's asking is for
Mhm.
more in the
Right.
relationship, and what she's saying is, "Okay, here's how I'm willing to proceed with this.
Hmm.
Here are the boundaries I wanna set. If you're interested, let's do it."
Yeah.
And that's how she sort of retakes control and works together with him, so
Hmm.
he's not the one calling all the shots. And their parents, who want them completely apart, are also not the ones calling the shots.
Yeah.
So it's just a way of remembering to speak up.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, this is great. This is kind of going a little deeper,
Yeah.
and I this is one of the things I love about when we look at plays and Shakespeare and things like that. And it reminds me of being back in high school when you're peeling back the layers of the
Yeah.
onion and you're kind of analyzing what the conversation is really about and what, the underlying themes are, and
Yeah.
things like that that are going in here. I'm going to pull up another ticker. I'm just going to encourage our audience, if you are joining us live, if you want to ask a question, we're going to move into Q&A next on here, but I'm going to continue to ask Carolyn a couple of questions as we go through here. So you mentioned earlier, we were here talking about what we can learn from Shakespeare. You mentioned earlier, there's some great examples of leadership, and there's some poor examples of leadership where we can almost learn as much from them. And I think there's a lot of parallels, and unfortunately in current society too. Some leaders went to really good leadership school, and others, learned poor management practices, leading by fear and intimidation, and then the results that come from that. So can you, I'm going to ask you, put you on the spot again here. Can you give us another example from a play that we may know, a Shakespeare play that we may know, that exemplifies poor leadership and what we can learn from that?
So there are actually some great examples of bad leadership. Shakespeare seemed to enjoy writing those because he really gets into those. But
Mm-hmm.
one of them is King Lear, which is often thought of as a play for old people, because King Lear is getting old and he's kind of losing his capacity to be a
Mm-hmm.
leader. And so he's planning to share some of the leadership of his kingdom with his family, but he sets it up as a transaction. So he says to his daughters, interestingly, daughters, you praise me, tell me how great I am and how much you love me, and I will give you power. So it's purely transactional. I'll give you power if you praise me. Praise for
Mm-hmm.
power. That transaction might sound somewhat familiar. Okay. So it really, I think if people read King Lear, they would kind of see what's going on. But
Yeah.
what happens is that transaction does not remain satisfactory because
Mm-hmm.
leadership is not a transaction. And so, as a way of leading, exchanging praise for power falls apart because both sides want more, and the initial transaction isn't enough. It isn't ever enough because
Mm-hmm.
transaction isn't leadership, and it
Mm-hmm.
ends badly because
Mm-hmm.
nobody's happy, nobody's satisfied. Everyone is trying to get more power. And
Mm-hmm.
so Lear is trying to then take it back, but he can't return praise because it doesn't work that way. It just
Yeah.
goes wrong in every possible way because
Mm-hmm.
that's not leadership. And that's the point of the play, is that transaction isn't leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, we can see in all kinds of different situations, in large and small organizations, as well as elsewhere, when
Mm-hmm.
leaders are trying to be transactional with people, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I once read, Carol Ann, that leaders who lead by, and you're talking about transaction, but I'm going to group this together, but leaders who lead by fear and intimidation,
Mhm.
you're going to get results in the short term, but the results that you're going to get are going to motivate people to get in the least amount of trouble possible. And they're going to start to pit people against each other.
Yeah.
Who's better, or maybe even, pushing people down so that you look better than others. And that will get you this results in the short term, but in the long term, that's not going to be beneficial for the company. It,
Right.
it, it will only get people to do the bare minimum, not to get in trouble. It's going to get people to pit against each other.
Yeah.
When my daughter plays volleyball, and she's on the freshman volleyball team, and you can see as the season goes on, as the girls are starting to play together and support each other and setting up a serve for the one so they can get it over the net, they are
Yes.
more successful as a team when they
Yes.
are all collaborating and working together.
Right.
Any thoughts on that as it relates to Shakespeare or any of your experiences?
Well, yes, it's very much, I mean, that we certainly see that in King Lear.
Yeah.
The two daughters who did that praise for power thing turn against each other because they're trying to get more power. They certainly are fighting with him. You also see another play people know is Macbeth, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what happens. It's all about fear, and now you have new enemies you have to go after, and the action you take against them gives you new enemies you have to go after. And then they're turning against you, and you can't put out that many fires because none of that is leadership.
Mhm.
Leadership is a way of getting people excited about acting on their own in positive ways, not out of fear, not out of transaction, not out of trying to not get in trouble. None of that is leadership. So Absolutely.
Yeah. So did you ever work in corporate, Carolyn, or have you always been self-employed? Because it sounds like you're pulling from these experience, but I'm kind of curious. What's your
Well,
background?
so I did work
Mhm.
for a period of time as a tech writer for a couple of large government contractors,
Mhm.
and did very much see this. But for several years, as I would go in as a consultant or as a trainer, you would often be brought in, and I was often brought in
Mhm.
when things went wrong.
Mm.
Right? When there was a change in leadership and it didn't go over very well, or when people weren't reacting well to the new person, or when
Yeah.
customers were leaving, that's often when they bring people in. And so I have gotten a sense of what happens when there's this lack of true leadership that is all about authenticity and trust and those kinds of things, rather than fear and intimidation and just saying what you have to say to get ahead. That
Mhm.
doesn't lead to good results long term.
Yeah. Why do you think this happens? Because it's like we know what gets us the biggest results in the long run. Why do we continue to have leaders who do lead with the wrong approaches, so to speak? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a really good question. And I'm sure that, if you go back to your daughter's volleyball team or we look
Mhm.
at other kinds of teams, I remember knowing of, because I was helping with a board of directors for a nonprofit
Mhm.
that worked really well as a team. But when one person sort of went off on her own after her own goals and not the organization's goals, it didn't go as well. So if a
Right.
member of your daughter's volleyball team decides, oh, I want to get this scholarship, so I want to take all of the shots that go over the net and score a point,
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
doesn't have the same effect. When people look inward and only inward for only my progress,
Mhm.
that's when it can fall apart because that shows other people to look only at themselves. A
Right.
strong leader looks at everybody. But
Mhm.
if there is anyone who's looking inward in any kind of a leadership role, that is picked up on by the rest of the group. And then
Mm.
they are trying to cover themselves and protect themselves. It just really spreads in,
Yeah.
sort of amazingly quick ways.
Mhm. So it's just patterns repeating itself, it sounds like
Yes.
over time,
Well, and
right?
and that's why
Mhm.
some of Shakespeare's plays could have been written today because these are human tendencies. It's the human experience. He's focused on the people. So it's not so much, oh, this is happening in ancient Britain. It's this
Mhm.
is someone who's trading praise for power. Oh, yeah, I've
Mhm.
seen that.
Mhm.
So when you step to the real principles within the plays, that's why I call it leadership case studies, because you see the way humans treat each other.
I could see, like, if you were presenting this at an industry I mean, you talked earlier about the things we learned from I was envisioning there's, like, a poster, like, "Everything I need to know about life I learned in kindergarten." Like,
Yes.
I could see that there might be a parallel, everything you need to know about leadership you could learn from Shakespeare. I don't know if something like that exists or if you've ever thought
Yes,
about
I've been
something.
working on it.
I could see it, like, and bringing in some of the parallels and some of the stories of famous plays that we've heard
Yes,
of over time.
because
But go
people
ahead.
think they know the plays, right? "Oh, yeah, I know Romeo and Juliet." "Oh, I
Yeah,
never thought about that." So when you
right.
start with something people think they know, and then they realize, "Oh, yeah, that's interesting. That sounds like today."
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you're a speaker as well, so tell me about, I mean, you do some keynote talks. I see keynote speaker on your profile. So what's your signature talk about? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm working on a new one, so I hope that's all right.
Mhm.
I'm talking about
Please.
5 essential leadership traits you can learn from Shakespeare. One of
Mhm.
those traits is to set boundaries in your life, and that is from our friend Juliet. But
Mhm.
another one, and I think this goes to your earlier question too, is a leader should focus on the people, the group, the employees, the team members, whatever they are, not just himself or herself. So I
Yeah.
look at Henry V, who gives a famous speech that includes the phrase, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And
Mm.
that
Mhm.
phrase, band of brothers, has sort of through the years been used in training, military training, other kinds of training about teamwork. But
Mhm.
the real thing Henry V does as the king, it's not just the speech, it's what he does the night before the speech,
Mm-hmm.
when he takes off his royal robes and puts on the robes of just an ordinary soldier and walks among his men. And I have to say, in that day, the army was men. So that's just the case. He walks among
Right.
his men
Mm-hmm.
and listens to what they need from him to be
Mm,
successful the next day. So the
mm-hmm.
things he says in his speech are the things he has heard them raise as concerns. So he's
Mm-hmm.
not just talking from his own perspective. He is directly addressing their needs so they believe in themselves. That's
Mm-hmm.
a great leader.
Yeah. That's
So he
really
talks
interesting.
about how they will be remembered. So it's like things like that that I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to talk about.
That's really interesting. And it's like this universal human condition and personality attributes and things that work
Yeah.
on leadership. And it's interesting to see some of the threads from history.
Yeah.
They're still applicable today. And you're like, this is something that's just that has existed throughout space and time, these different things that are on here. Now, have you written any books as well? Are you an author yet?
I am an author. I have
Mhm.
written 2 books that are very much history based, so they
Mhm.
don't address the Shakespeare leadership stuff. I'm working on a book about that. But I've
Yeah.
written a couple of books about history, the
Mhm.
Tudors, back from that Anne Boleyn scene with my mom.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So one is called The Tudors by Numbers. I got
Mhm.
excited about numbers in the Tudor times, not just 6 wives of Henry VIII, but if you look at the whole Tudor period, there are
Mhm.
2 queens who aren't queens by marriage, they're queens because they inherited the crown,
Okay.
and 42% of the Tudor dynasty is under the rule of these 2 women.
Hmm.
So even
That's
though we always
interesting.
think about Henry VIII, no.
Yeah.
42% is the rule of women. And so those are the kinds of numbers I look at to just
Yeah.
get us to see differently. And then my most recent book is Courting the Virgin Queen, and it's about Elizabeth I and basically why she decided not to get married.
Hmm.
She's the only monarch in English history to rule as an adult and never marry. She had lots of offers, but why did she decide not to marry?
Hmm.
So those are the 2. They're not the Shakespeare leadership, but those are the 2 I have out right now.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to get the link in and put it into the show notes for people that might be interested.
Great.
And I'm going to start to wind down our conversation, but I also see on your LinkedIn profile, I've got it open up on the side. You're a podcaster as well. So there might be people listening to this on my podcast. They're like, oh, they want to keep learning more about it. So what's the name of your podcast?
My podcast is Royals, Rebels, and Romantics.
Hmm.
So that sort of covers all the possibilities with history and Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But it's really bringing the stories of history to life today because, like you say, the same
Yeah.
things keep happening. And it's really
Mhm.
instructive to us today because it's people. People are very much the same. They're looking for a lot of the same things.
Mhm.
Technology changes, transportation changes, but people and what they want, that
Mhm.
remains largely the same. And so their stories
Yeah.
really are our stories.
Yeah. And I think in a sea of people that are talking about AI and all these future driven things, I
Yeah.
think, in the sea of sameness about everything, I would think a talk at a conference about what we can learn from Shakespeare and leaders. I think that would be a really interesting topic for an event. So, as we are winding down the conversation, Carol Ann, first I'm going to share your LinkedIn profile up on screen. Are you open to connecting with people on LinkedIn? And if so, any
Absolutely.
instructions?
I
Okay.
love connecting and learning. I want to learn about you as
Mhm.
well as share some ways maybe we could work together or I could help you, but I definitely want to connect. Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. And I would encourage our audience, whether you're listening to this live playback podcast, when you visit Carol Ann's profile on LinkedIn, mention that you heard about her from my show. Just mention Brenda Muller in there. And her name, I'm going to spell this out for our podcast listeners. It's Carol Ann Lloyd Stanger. Stanger? Is am I saying that
Mhm.
correctly? So if you search for her profile, it's linkedin.com/in/Carol Ann Lloyd. And it's LLOYD. So make sure you
Right.
get two L's inside there. With that said, now let's say someone's listening to this and they are interested in working with you. Can you give us a summary of? I know you speak, I know you've got books, but tell us what are the offerings that you have through your business?
So, yes, I would be really interested in speaking. I do a lot of speaking for organizations large and small. So, just reach out. I also work individually with people if they feel like they just need a little brush up, whether it's some personal leadership or your leadership role within an organization, but it's just the two of us talking about it. Certainly that. And I just really enjoy working with people. I will say that I'm starting some new things in the first of the year. So there will be articles and a newsletter and more podcasts that address specifically this idea of Shakespeare and leadership, which I'm
Mhm.
adding to Royals, Rebels, and Romantics. So new
Wonderful.
things are right around the corner with all of this stuff.
Good. And is the best place to go? I put your website up on screen. Is it the carolannlloyd.com? Is that the best place
Yes.
for us to go to get a hold of you?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can email me too if you'd like to do that. It's easy. It's Carol Ann
Mhm.
at carolannlloyd.com. So if
Wonderful.
that's easier, or LinkedIn or other social media, I'm at Shake Up History.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you for that, Carolyn. And it's been a delight. We've known each other. We've kind of circled our wagons, so to speak, on
Yes.
the Speaker Friend Fridays for a while. And I can't remember what it was. I think there was somebody else posting about you talking about this. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I want to challenge our listeners, our viewers on this as well. I'm always like, I want to surround myself with people that are more interesting for me, that come from different backgrounds, that have different experiences, that can help me to be more successful as someone who is enthusiastically self-employed. And Carolyn, I think you epitomized this, you said obsession. I like that. But my same concept of being enthusiastically self-employed, you're obsessed with Shakespeare, and you've been able to translate that into actionable insights and learnings and teachings that are helping people. So this has really been a delight. I think I'm going to look up, over the weekend on Netflix or Hulu or something. I'm going to look up some Shakespeare plays that may have been converted into movies and brush up on some of my Shakespeare's on here. But I just want to say thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Brenda. It has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. All right. So as we are wrapping up this conversation, I want to let you all know, if you have not yet posted on LinkedIn this week, this month, or even this year, no time like the present. As soon as the video is done playing here on LinkedIn, there's going to be a little share icon at the bottom, and you can share this video along and tell people something they might want to watch for inside the video. I know, like, when I put this on the podcast, I'm going to say at the beginning, this is about Shakespeare, but hold on, I want you to stay in and watch the show here, because there's actually lessons learned about leaders that you can apply to today. And there's even lessons learned about women in history that are still occurring in today's society. And there's some sub lessons that you can learn from different Shakespeare plays and acts and things like that as well. So even by sharing it along, maybe you've got a boss who leads by fear and intimidation. You might not want to say, hey, boss, you should listen to this. But sometimes when we share things on LinkedIn, we reach people who are readers who don't actually interact with the post. They don't like it. They don't comment, but they click on it and they might watch it. So you might find a boss who needs to watch this, by posting it, they might actually watch it. And maybe you'll reach into their psyche with that on there. So again, thank you, Carolyn. Any final comments for us on what we can learn from Shakespeare as we wrap up today?
Well, I just think, again, like you say, in his day, he was writing to be popular in his day, but he
Mhm.
somehow taps into this idea of what we share as humans. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot more to it than what you might have hated in high school. So I would just ask you to give it another chance.
Oh, I love it. Well, with that said, you've invigorated me, so I'm definitely going to do that,
Great.
Carolyn. So I hope to see you on a Speaker Friend Friday again here
Yes,
too.
absolutely. Very soon.
All right, wonderful. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all again on LinkedIn. Take
Thank
care, everyone.
you.